Welcome, my name is Tim Millerick. I'm the president of the school board in Sherman Independent School District. And on behalf of the planning group and others, we're just pleased to see so many people in this auditorium concerned about public education. So thank you for being here. Our purpose is obviously to find out the positions of the candidates in this forum on public education, and that's our primary reason to be here. So I'll just move quickly through this agenda here. We would like very much to recognize sponsors for this evening, and most importantly would be Grayson College for giving us this facility and all the support, tech support they've given us. It's been very easy to work with them. Dr. McMillan's done a great job as he comes down the middle aisle here. Give him a round of applause. We also acknowledge Bells, Bonham, Collinsville, Cooper, Denison, Dodge City, Ector, Honeygrove, Pottsboro, SNS, Savoy, Sherman, Tom Bean, Trenton, Van Alstyne, Whitesboro, and White Bright ISDs that signed up to this forum. I hope the candidates have now learned that the educational block is pretty big and they need to listen to us. I'd like to believe there's some candidates in the audience tonight. We told them they couldn't speak, but we would quickly recognize them. So I'm not sure if Scott Mild, the Lieutenant Governor, is here with us tonight. Is he here tonight? He was supposed to be, not sure. Okay, don't hold it against him, he's not here. Lander Bethel, U.S. Congress District 4, Democrat. Lander, are you here? Okay, I'm 0 for 2, but I met this person in the lobby personally. Jason Butcher, can you stand up for a 59th District Judgeship? Jason, thank you for being here. I know Mr. Lawrence is here and Mr. Brown are here, and honorable and esteemed elected officials in Grayson County, so we thank them and others for being here. We're pleased, very pleased, that all of the candidates running for Texas House District 62 agreed to be with us tonight. We think it's important to hear their voice and understand how they see things playing out for public education. So let me just quickly introduce to you the Republicans in this race. Kevin Couch, Brett Lawson, Reggie Smith, Valerie Hefner, and David Schott. We thank, Valerie's a Democrat and David's a Libertarian, and we thank them for their time and their commitment for being here. Now it's my honor to introduce the moderator this evening, and we're all in this room, we're all gathered. Some of us contributed a little bit of time to get here, but there's one person whose passion puts us in this room, and it's tonight's moderator, Mr. Randy Sedlacek, the Denison ISD president. Please give him a loud round of applause.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. All right. We're going to try to move along pretty fast. We've got a lot of questions to ask and a little bit of time. So I want to go over the ground rules real quick so everybody knows what the ground rules are and what they can and cannot get away with. First of all, this is a forum. It's not a debate. We're not going to allow anybody to argue or point anybody out. It's not a debate. You can't question each other. Props, charts, signs, diagrams, etc. are not allowed by candidates. We're allowing the candidates 3 minutes each for opening statements. And we're going to allow 2 minutes each to answer questions, and then 2 minutes each for closing remarks when we're finished. We'd ask that you hold all of your applause to the end of each question to keep things moving and give them their time allowed. We've got timekeepers that are going to keep us on track tonight. They're sitting in the front row. You'll see them holding up cards. That's the cards to cue our candidates on how much time is left. They'll be holding up a green card to start, a yellow card when they have 10 seconds to wrap it up, and then a red card when their time is up. Before the forum, just a few minutes ago, we selected the random order that the candidates will be addressing you. So we've got them in order here. David Schaub's going to be first, Kevin Couch second, Reggie Smith, Valerie Hefner, and then Brent Lawson. So at this time, I'd like to give candidates their time for opening statements. So Mr. Schaub, you're first. You got 2 minutes, or 3 minutes, sorry.
I've watched enough forums and debates over the years, and I've always wondered, is it good to be first, in the middle, last, and so I get to be first. And it's unusual, and I want to say thank you to everybody that's here tonight. Thank you to the moderator. I've known Randy. He is definitely passionate about this topic. We've had many good discussions on this topic over the years. And you don't see libertarians that often in these forums because we're not involved in the primary process. So you don't see us. We do our stuff by a convention. So we're going to, and I don't have any campaign material because I don't have to worry about it until November. Who am I? I am a resident of Grayson County for the last 34 years. All of it's been in Tom Bean. I'm a father of 5. My wife, Janet, she's in the audience tonight. Thank you for being here. We homeschooled all 5 of our children. That doesn't mean I'm against schooling. We just chose to homeschool. And so what you're going to hear from me tonight is I am an advocate of choice. Not against your schools, not against teachers, not against local school board members, not against administrators. I am an advocate of choice, and you'll hear that almost all night. Personally, I am a retired Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army. I'm also a retired systems software engineer from what used to be E-Systems, then Raytheon, and then became L3. And so I've retired from both of those, so that's my background. And so you have a little bit about that. I've also served on city council in Tom Bean, and I've also been the mayor of Tom Bean. So I'm looking forward tonight just to provide some information on how I come across, how libertarians feel, and actually to address some of these issues because education issues are important, whether your choice, whether you want the way the schools are going now, or however, it's important to every one of us. So thank you.
Mr. Couch, 3 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you guys again for coming out tonight. My name is Kevin Couch, and I'm a conservative Republican running to be your next state representative here in Grayson County. I'm also a lifelong member of Grayson County, and I'm proud to sit up here and say that today, and proud to be running for state representative here in District 62. So here's why I'm running. I'm sick and tired of seeing the same folks get elected and go to Austin and spend their entire careers there. They tend to forget who exactly elected them in the first place. I was thinking, they say Austin has a bum problem, and I say, yeah, absolutely. You can look at about 80 or 100 of them at any given day at the state capitol, and we've seen it far too many times that you'll have someone say that they're a Republican, and they'll be looking at you straight in your face just like this, in a situation at a podium like this, and then as soon as they get down to Austin, they become part of the problem and not part of the solution. They're not figuring out how to do this. These career politicians have spent their entire lives, their entire careers, beholden to the Republican elites down in Austin, and they're refusing to govern conservatively. Tonight we're going to talk about education, and I'm so excited about it. I'm very passionate about it. I'm a product of public education, had a great upbringing at Denison schools. But until we start electing people who are not in bed with the lawyers and lobbyists in Austin, we're not going to see those conservative reforms that we're looking for here in Texas. So I look forward to a frank conversation on the issues tonight. I'm going to try to answer your questions as honestly as I know how to, because God knows that these political cliches and these lawyer speaks, they just don't get us very far in solving Texas problems. The overarching theme I want you to leave here tonight with is we have to start electing an outsider like myself. The people who view politics as a service to you and not as a career choice. The only way to get rid of them is to start electing conservative outsiders like myself. My name's Kevin Couch, and I was raised by a single mother here in Denison, and she taught me the value of hard work. She actually inspired me to run for my seat on the Sherman City Council. And I was proud to lead the city's the charge on the city's job tax repeal, and it won with 90% approval in November in the election. And I voted to roll back regulations on homeowners. I voted and took a stand against higher property taxes and fees inside of the city. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a job creator. Most importantly, I'm a Christian, and I'm the only candidate in this race who has a proven record and legislative record of conservative reforms. And that's why tonight I'm asking for your vote in this upcoming March primary.
Mr. Smith, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you so much for all your work and all of you who have labored to put on this great event. Thank you all for being here. I know that many of you are educators or staff in the public education system. Some of you are probably in the homeschool area and the private school area. We're all here today about education, and I appreciate your interest. Those of you who are in this, you'll often hear folks say to military service folks, they say, thank you for your service. As well we should. They sacrifice for our country. But I think all too often, the good folks in public education and in education in general who sacrifice day in, day out to be in these classrooms and to do the work that you do for the pay that you do not get, I think we need to say to you, thank you for your service, and so I would say that to you now. I'm Reggie Smith. Let me just tell you a little bit about me. I'm 48 years old. I grew up in Sherman, went to Sherman Public Schools with my 2 siblings. I went to Wakefield, Piner, Sherman High School, Austin College, and I would have gone to law school here in town, but they didn't have one, so I had to go to South Texas College of Law. I graduated from Austin College in '91, and I graduated from law school in 1994. And I came home immediately to practice law. And I've practiced law here for 23 years and will continue to practice on into the future. I grew up on a farm off 1417, not too far from here. My 2 parents, I'm blessed to tell you, are still alive and still live out there. On the weekends, or excuse me, during the week, during the summer, I worked for my grandfather, the late Dwight Smith, down in Howe, Texas, and I worked in his farm machinery business and on his farm. I started when I was 9, and I worked there till I was 19 during the summer. It was a blast. We broke all kinds of child labor laws, there's no doubt about it. But what I can tell you about all that is it gave me a real feel for Grayson County and a real feel for this area. And I love that I still have to this day, which is why I came back to invest with my family here. I have 3 children, they're 16, 14, 10. They go to Van Alstyne Public Schools, and my wife and I have been married 20 years this last December. And my wife and my oldest son are here with me this evening. I want you to know that I come from a family of public educators. My mother was a public educator until she retired in 1977 to have my younger brother, Hunter Smith. My sister was an English teacher. Her husband was a math teacher. My grandfather was president of the school board and was a trained teacher in 1925. And so I come from your situation. I understand public educators. What I would tell you folks is that Texas is the 11th largest economy in the world. We have a great business partnership with education, and we need to continue that. Thank you.
Valerie Hefner, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. So I'm Valerie Hefner, and I'm running to be your state representative. I grew up on the south side of Sherman, Texas, and attended school here in Sherman Independent School District. I am now raising my family here. I started my career at 23 years old at a medical supply company as an entry-level data processing clerk, and over the last 12 years, I've worked my way up to an executive in the company. My husband's name is Danny Fox Jr. He's a disabled military vet, an elite at the small business that he works for, and the most supportive husband anyone could ask for. Even when you come home from there and tell him you're going to run for state rep. I have 3 sons. Desmond is a senior in high school. He's our brainiac. He participates in all the advanced classes, an aspiring psychiatrist, and we are anxiously awaiting an acceptance letter from UT. Clay is our sophomore. He's our artist, gamer, Presbyterian. Says he's going to live off the grid someday. Lance is a freshman. He's our lawyer, FBI negotiator. He has given me the opportunity to get to know several of our fine principals. He's definitely going to be running something someday. I also have a my sixth grader that attends Dillingham Intermediate. She's our social butterfly, the bravest girl I know. She opens hearts and minds every day, and she has an activist heart. I believe that my children's education and your children's education needs to be a priority. We need to focus on funding our classrooms, and we need to forget about those bathrooms. We need to strengthen and not abandon the promise of a public education. Our Texas founding fathers had the foresight to guarantee public education in our community, in our Constitution, sorry. This was to safeguard an education for everybody. Vouchers are not the solution. We need to support our retired teachers, make teaching an attractive career path for our younger generations to pursue, and bring in or do away with standardized testing. I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn and ask for your support, because I think together we can come up with real long-term solutions to funding our school crisis. Again, I'm Valerie Hefner, and thank you for having me here tonight.
Mr. Brent Lawson, 3 minutes.
Hi, thanks for coming tonight. I've got some flyers out in the foyer, and be happy to talk to you after the meeting if you want to know more about me. But tonight, I'm really just going to talk about education, because education in Texas is in a state of crisis. And that crisis is going to become a catastrophe if our legislature continues to refuse to take the problem seriously and continues to insist on playing politics with the education of Texas kids. Administrators are over-constrained. Teachers are not getting the support that they need in the classroom. The accountability system is not rational. Our kids are overstressed by over-testing, and our obligations to retired teachers are not being met. There is no excuse for allowing these problems to languish until they have become a source of political division in Texas. Commitment to our public schools and to the education of Texas kids should never be allowed to become a partisan issue in Texas. The next session of the Texas legislature must be an education session. As a conservative, it is my conviction that the preservation of liberty requires a well-educated society. For 3 decades, all education reform in the state of Texas has been driven by litigation. When the courts are directing education policy, the state legislature has abdicated its responsibility. Our retired teachers, for half of that time, have not received a cost of living increase. Every year for 15 years, inflation has cut the pensions of our retired teachers. We need reforms that address the whims of the insurance market and ensure that our retired teachers see routine cost of living increases. It is insidious to deny our retired teachers participation in Social Security while we ignore the shortcuts. Our retired teachers served Texas in good faith. It is time for Texas to honor that service. My wife is a school teacher. I have watched her work until 2 o'clock in the morning for months on end because the school that she hired into did not have curriculum or materials for her to use to teach the several classes and labs that she was hired to teach. Every paper that she handed to students that year, she had to create herself, and she wasn't willing to shortchange the education of the kids in her care. No teacher in a Texas public school should ever be in that position. It's ironic that a lot of our teachers in rural schools work much harder than their suburban counterparts for much less pay. When a teacher can drive to Collin County for more money, it makes it hard to retain and hire teachers. And I am out of time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Brent. Now we're going to move into the moderator questions. These are questions that were predetermined ahead of time. The candidates have been given copies of the questions and to be able to prepare for these. After this, we'll have some audience questions that you've submitted before the forum, and we'll get to those after these. These questions, you each have 2 minutes to answer. The first question has to do with school choice and vouchers. So the Texas Constitution mandates that the legislature of the state is to establish and make suitable provision for the support and maintenance of an efficient system of public free schools. Do you support or oppose taxpayer-funded school choice programs such as school vouchers, tax credit scholarships, education savings accounts, etc.? And please explain your position. We'll start with Mr. Couch. You have 2 minutes.
The answer to the question is emphatically no, I do not support vouchers in any fashion or form. I think first of all, we've got to separate these two words that have unnecessarily become entwined in Texas politics, and that's school choice. In this country, I believe that we are incredibly blessed to have school choice. We're Americans at heart here, guys. We're Texans at heart. We can wake up every morning and we're in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we have that choice. So I want to make an apology. I'm sorry that politics has hijacked a phrase called school choice and rolled it into a way to soften the blow on taking dollars away from public education and away from your pockets and your hard-earned money and your budgets in order to do that. So anyway, so the way I like to phrase this is I'm not a vouchers guy ever. I will answer that question the same way whether I'm sitting in front of a room of educators or in front of a room of Tea Party activists. It doesn't matter. Vouchers disproportionately hurt us. They hurt us, the rural districts in this state. They hurt us disproportionately. They hurt the poor school districts, and they bring more entitlement to those large suburban areas. So as the question stated, we do have an obligation to fund our school system, and exercise your right to school choice should not absolve you of this responsibility. I apologize for the school choice thing being hijacked by politicians and career politicians down in Austin, but you in fact are American, and I will say that we do support our public educators. My campaign supports our public educators, and we have to continue that priority, and I wish that this next session in 2019 that our legislators who get elected to go down to Austin will take their responsibility to fund public education seriously and bring about true reform and change in Austin.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you for the question. No is the answer to the question. I am against vouchers and all those other forms that you mentioned. I believe that what we have to do as leaders in this circumstance and as parents in a public education system is stop robbing Peter to pay Paul, which is essentially what we do down at the legislature all the time, is rob Peter to pay Paul, and it ends up hurting public education. Vouchers are another way that happens. Let's take it from two different perspectives. One perspective is on the public school perspective. We already have a beleaguered public school budget situation. We've already got property tax values that are through the roof because of that situation. And the next question involves funding. We need to deal with that. But we can't afford a voucher system in public education right now. The second part of that is, how do you have accountability when it comes to these vouchers? Who's going to keep an eye on the $7,500 check that gets sent to somebody? We're going to have some more bureaucracy. How much is that going to cost? So you see, on the public side of things, it's ridiculous. On top of that, the people in other states who have been doing this, most likely who are going to receive these vouchers, are already going to private schools. So I don't think it satisfies the smell test on the public school side of things. On the private school side of things, I've talked to many, many private school owners or directors, teachers. They don't want the money. The reason why they don't want the money is they don't want the regulations, and they don't want all the headaches that go with that. And I can't say that I blame them. Right? And from a legal standpoint, You have a child comes in, there's public money coming into a private colloquial school, we say prayers. We like to have creationism discussions and religious discussions. What happens though when that child decides to go home and say something about it and the Supreme Court ends up in our private schools? So I'm against the voucher idea. Thank you.
Okay, so honestly, I don't feel like we need to spend too much time discussing this one. Governor Dan Patrick is making a mistake trying to push Texas legislators to approve vouchers. All vouchers will do is divert the public funding away from our public schools to private investors. Our dollars will go to schools that are not held to the same standards and leaves private investors free to campaign, restrict retirement benefits, and most importantly, deny an education to all students. We can look to the latest research on vouchers and charter schools from other states, such as Louisiana, Ohio, Indiana, DC, and see that these kids are doing worse in reading, math, and when compared to public school students' performance with state tests, they are actually lower. So that's why I don't think vouchers are a solution for our Texas children, and I don't really have any more to add on that.
When my family moved back to Texas from an overseas assignment, 2 of our 3 kids integrated back into the Texas schools without any problem at all. Unfortunately, our 3rd child didn't. He struggled for the entire year. And we worked with teachers, we worked with administration, we worked with our son. And at the end of the year, he was behind. He was discouraged. He had lost any interest in education, and his self-confidence was shot. So my wife and I took him out of school and we homeschooled him for 2 years. And at the end of that 2 years, we put him back in the public school, and he did great. We were very fortunate to be in a position to be able to do that for our son. But everybody is not so fortunate. And when a parent sees their child struggling in the education situation that they are in, that parent has a responsibility to try to help that child get the best education possible. Sometimes those parents need help. That is one of the problems that we're trying to address. About 30 other states have come up with solutions, and that is why I support parents having the flexibility that they need to solve those problems. But if someone else in the education community has another solution to take care of that problem, I would love to talk to you about it. In my own personal case, our expenses were something less than $1,000 a year for curriculum and books, and that seems like a pretty small investment to make to save a child's education. To be clear, properly funding our public schools and providing parents the options that they need are not mutually exclusive. Our public schools must have the funds that they need, regardless of any other issue. Thank you.
Mr. Shaw.
It sounds like I'm going to be the odd guy out because I am in for choice. So we're going to start from there. I had the privilege of teaching the Constitution of the United States to a bunch of homeschoolers. So yeah, I have a teaching experience. Borrowing, and I'm going to have to hope I get Randy's quote correctly from the article, we talked about this. The legislation is empowered to provide for free public schooling, or public school, free school. Forget the word free, somebody's going to pay, so let's not go there. What does the word public mean? Taxpayers. School educators. Bunch of educators here, I agree, I applaud you. I have nothing against educators. My wife teaches, I love her. So guess what, I love education. Sherman, you're going to see me tomorrow night if you go to the soccer game. I'll be the guy out there on the field blowing a whistle at sometimes. I have nothing against the schools. School choice is not a bad thing. Choice is normal. Go out into the parking lot, we chose our cars, we chose the cell phones we're going to use, we choose where we are going to live. 6 states, actually 7 states, January 1st has passed, 7 states have adopted what's called educational savings accounts. In the 6 states that we have measurements for, public funding for the current schools that we know as public schools have all increased. They have not decreased. So we have to look at it and say, those states obviously know what they're doing. They're doing something. Maybe we should study what they are doing. Now, some of those are limited as to what they can do. Some of them are only maybe $1,000 to help a parent that can't do certain things, saying this. I'm not in favor of saying, hey, let's send $12,000 to a parent and say, here's $12,000. No, it's going to take some administration. You wouldn't normally hear that from a libertarian, but that's what we need to do. So we can have choice, educational savings account, and we still meet the requirements of the Constitution.
All right, we'll move on to the second question now, which has to do with school funding. So candidates, what reforms to school funding through property taxation, if any, would you propose? And we'll start with Mr. Smith.
Let me just say that the school funding debacle that we have right now in public education is another supreme example. It's probably the supreme example of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Currently, the share of state funding in our public education systems is well below 50%. It may be well below 40%. In fact, I've heard a number of 38%. We have local property taxpayers then who are having to bear the brunt of that. 57% of public education expense is borne by property owners and public in each district. That's ridiculous. The question was, what can we do about that? Well, there's a lot of broad answers to that. There's also some specific answers in my view. I think specifically, we've got to figure out, we've got to have equity between rural schools and urban schools in the funding formulas. However that's going to happen. And those funding formulas, I'm not about to start explaining that in 2 minutes. We've got to do away with a small school penalty for those school districts that are less than 300 square miles and have 1,600 students. We've got to stop wasting education dollars on burdensome standardized tests and unfunded mandates from Austin and DC. And we've got to do away with ridiculous regulations that eat up precious education dollars and provide no value to the education process. Bottom line, folks, we've got to reprioritize. We have to prioritize public education in Texas. Public education in Texas is the fertilizer from which everything else grows in large part. We have the 11th largest economy in the world. And that's not because we have no one in public education who's working in that economy. To the contrary, most folks working in that economy come from the public education system in Texas. It's a great thing, and we need to reprioritize it in this next legislative session. Thank you.
Ms. Hefner.
Okay, so me and Mr. Randy were kind of thinking on the same brainwaves. I was going to start out by saying our Texas founding fathers knew we needed to guarantee public education if our state was to continue on successfully. So they actually wrote the whole thing, the general diffusion of knowledge being essential to the preservation of the liberties and rights of the people, it shall be the duty of the legislator of Texas to establish and make suitable provisions for the support and the maintenance of efficient systems of public free schools. It's the legislator's responsibility. Instead, what we are seeing over the last decade is the legislator is continually cutting the state percentage of education costs, and they're forcing the ISDs to raise property taxes. What needs to be happening is the opposite. We need to shift more of this responsibility from the property taxes to the state. And how can we do that? If we need to look into other sources of taxable revenue, well then that's what we need to do. We also need to raise the homestead exemption to provide some relief to the homeowners. That's all I have to say on that.
Mr. Lawson.
So I think we're finally going to see the end of Robin Hood in the next legislature. At the end of the special session this past year, we were fortunate that they finally put together a commission to study education funding in the state of Texas. The recommendations that come out of that commission are going to be the basis for the reform discussions that happen in the next legislature. None of us know what that is going to be. Courts have described our funding system as Byzantine. I think we need to invent a new word for something that's much worse than that. Texas education funding is just a mess of spaghetti. I'm looking forward to seeing the legislature take this responsibility back from the courts and actually do something in the next session that involves something more than just kicking the can down the road again. We do need reforms that address the disparity in teacher pay between rural schools and suburban schools. Those differences are big enough that they cause staffing disruptions for our schools, and they need some help with that. But essentially, the end of Robin Hood is going to mean that the state of Texas is going to have to provide more funds from sources that don't involve property taxes. Thanks.
Mr. Shaw.
The question was concerning property tax. Okay. Educators, administrators, local board officials, parents, students. We touched on all those. One category we've left out, taxpayers. We've left out the taxpayers. I had the privilege of talking with several people here over the weekend concerning property tax. If I were to say the word income tax, I might as well start running now because the bullets will start flying, because I know how the state of Texas is on income tax. But here's the sad truth. Property tax is coming from your income. You can't go dig a hole in your ground and give that to the county and say, here's my property tax. It's coming out of your income. It's an indirect income tax. I say this because my first degree was in government with a minor in economics. I studied a whole lot about taxation. And income tax can be direct or it can be indirect, and property tax is one of the worst that we have. The question was, what about property tax? I would be moving to a transition to some sort of a consumption tax to get away from the property tax. Talk to property owners, and the number one complaint they have, they're tired of renting their property from the various taxing entities. So we're going to have to do something different. I agree with Ms. Hefner over here. This is not a debate. She's right. It's a state responsibility. The Constitution says it's a state responsibility. Let's take that burden away from the people right here in the room, out in the rural areas, and even in the suburban areas. Now, my son came back from Tokyo where he lived for a year, and he found out what taxes were like when he had to pay taxes on his house in McKinney. And he said, whoa, he wasn't ready for that. We've got to protect not only the schools, but we got to start looking at those taxpayers. So let's start looking at ideas to reform property tax.
Mr. Couch.
First of all, I don't think that property taxes are a great way to fund schools or government, for that matter. I believe that they are incredibly unfair, and unfair in the way that we tax our most precious things, and that's our land. That's what we work hard for, is to have something to show, and that's our land, and that's our homes, and so I pride myself on kind of having a really great field campaign going on right now. We've knocked over 5,000 doors. Guys, the number one thing that people want to stop doing is, like Mr. Schaub said, do not make me rent my house from the government. And most Republicans will sit up here and they'll say that they want lower property taxes or to get rid of them altogether. But what they're not great at telling you is how they're going to make up for that shortfall, and that's the Texas legislature. They dropped the ball last session. They failed Texas children, they failed parents, they failed the educators, the people who are involved in this very room right now, because they couldn't figure out how to make up for this lost revenue. I'm a business guy. There's no excuse for what happened in Austin last session. There's zero excuse. You get up in the morning, you put on your big boy pants, you put on your thinking cap, and you go to work in Austin. We need to keep all options on the table when we talk about how we're going to reach equitable funding for our schools, including shifting to some type of consumption tax. I would agree with that. So I think when we discuss it, we have to be clear. Our schools have to be funded from somewhere. If you want to decrease a portion of that funding, you've got to be specific on how you're going to do that. And if you elect me to go down to Austin and be your next state representative, I'm a proven business guy. I create businesses, I've sold businesses. And I will put on my thinking cap and I will solve this problem and I will fight for you. I'm a fighter. And I'm not afraid to stand up to the establishment in Austin and these career politicians who are slaves to lawyers and lobbyists and tell them that we cannot fail public education again.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. Next topic is over accountability. So the question is, what are your thoughts on the current accountability testing mandates? What changes to the current accountability system would you propose, if any? And for this question, we'll start with Ms. Hefner.
Accountability. We cannot call what we're doing right now with the STAR test an accountability test. It is literally a bubbling exercise on steroids. We are mandated to do this in the name of saving money, cutting red tape, but Abbott and Patrick refuse to consider the one thing that will save money and improve Texas education. Stop wasting the money on standardized testing. We waste millions of dollars a year and force every independent school district to prepare and administer these tests that do nothing but terrorize our teachers and the students. They throw up. Then we hear that our students come out of the school not job ready. It's because there's not many jobs where you bubble in bubbles with a number 2 list. I want to ask you a real question. I really want you to think about this. What more can we expect when we take every bit of power out of our teachers' hands? And I just don't feel like I need to waste your time with a bunch of talk, so.
Mr. Lawson.
When it comes to accountability, we're basically doing it wrong. There's way too much testing. It's a burden on the entire system. It's a burden on our children, and it's a distraction from education. Testing should be about identifying those areas where a school needs improvement. That doesn't require anywhere close to the amount of testing that's currently being done. Test to check early reading, test before promotion from elementary school, and a test before graduation should be enough to tell a school what areas really need to be focused on for improvement in their processes. Accountability is only meaningful if it involves things that those being held accountable actually have control over. The idea that graduation rates or test scores can be uniform from one school to the next are just not realistic. Basing accountability on those factors is guaranteed to create incentives that are compatible with the education goals. Feedback is a necessary part of improving any system, and tests provide that feedback. And what we do with that feedback is really what should be the focus of accountability. Identify areas for improvement, create a plan to make those improvements, execute that plan, and then conduct audits to make sure that everything is happening the way that it's supposed to. And those audits would ideally be handled by people, a neutral third party from within the education system, or retired educators. That's a pretty high-level description. It's not very detailed, but in industry, this is a common practice in organizations that are committed to continuous improvement. The bureaucratic approaches that we're using today, defined by government, are not really efficient for accomplishing the goals that we're really trying to accomplish with accountability. Thank you.
Mr. Shaw.
I hate tests. I'll just start like that. I think I'm the old guy up here. I don't know, might be. I remember the standardized testing that I had in school. It was the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. You might recognize that name. It's now called the Iowa Assessment Test. I went to their website here recently, and they had one interesting statement. The test's only purpose is to understand the level of an individual student. You cannot use tests to measure the quality of a school. I cannot use tests to measure the quality of your teaching. Now, I teach soccer referees. Don't fail me because the soccer referees failed the test, because, you know, we're taking a standardized test, especially if you come in and look and see how I'm teaching. The best assessment for students, that's the teachers. You're the ones closest to them. You're the ones who know those students. You're the ones who understand what they need. I would say you should be empowered to do whatever is necessary to help them along. My second point on this is, I'm a systems software engineer. That's my master's degree, was in systems engineering. I did a lot of statistics. Guess what? Standardized testing, I would expect a normalized bell curve. Yeah, the average might shift. It's still going to be, there's going to be some of these people right down here in the little 10% area, you know, saying, hey, they're really good at math. So should my English teacher, you know, get credit because I was one of those guys who's always in the 99th percentile in math, and I was just one of these average English? And so, why can't you get his English grade up here? No, that's the wrong way to do it. A test is only a tool. A test is only a tool that the educators are the best people to use. It should not be measuring school districts. It should not be measuring the classroom.
Mr. Couch.
I'm going to hop on the soapbox really quickly about accountability. I remember sitting in my green recliner in my living room, and I think I had my shirt off eating a bowl of Cheerios. Don't imagine that. You may get a weird thought. Anyway, so I remember sitting here and I was listening to a session, this past session, and let me tell you what pisses me off, is that we got establishment politicians ready to hand out A through F grades to school districts while they can't even pull up their big boy pants and put on their thinking hats and fund schools properly because they're too busy arguing with each other. They did you a disservice. And it pisses me off. It should piss you off too. They failed you. So what I hear, so anyway, the ones who deserve the F grades, let's be honest, are the establishment politicians in Austin who failed you guys this last session. That's where I was going with my green chaired Cheerios shirt off story. But what I hear all the time from you educators is that the current testing regime forces you to spend too much time in the classroom teaching to the test and not enough time focusing on the child's individual needs. And that absolutely has to change. Our teachers need to be treated as partners, and underline that in red or highlight it, whatever you do. But our teachers have to be treated as partners in reforming this testing system that we have in Texas. Not treated as the enemy, which is how so many politicians who hand out grades to school districts seem to view their roles. Politicians in Austin are quick to do that. However, I will say this, we absolutely must hold people accountable. I understand that, but let's make sure we are teaching to this child's individual needs. And we will wind up helping everyone, not hurting everyone, because this standardized testing mechanism is just not working, and it's failing our students. And I would go to Austin and fight to stand next to you guys, united with you, to reform this testing system in Texas. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Been lots of discussion about these standardized tests. You hear it all the time. But I've got to tell you, I've never met a standardized student. Have you? They're all different. I've got 3 of them. Every one of them is different. My brother, my sister, and I, we were all 3 different. All of your students are different. Yet somehow Austin wants to tell you that your job is dependent on how these kids, in all their different ways, do on these stinking tests. You know, we have this hyper accountability environment right now, and I have several ideas as to why we're in this situation, but what I can tell you is this. My accountability process whenever I was a kid and I was blessed was with my mom and dad. And I know it was that way with you. And if it didn't work out at school and I got busted, then I was busted at home. And I'm suspecting it was that way with you too. And I'm not saying that we can go back to that time. That's for a different discussion. But what I can tell you is that this overburdensome, ridiculous amount of money that we spend on all of these tests really come down to one thing that we're not going to be able to repair, and that's what's going on at home. What we need is local control. We have accountability. It's you guys, school boards, principals, superintendents, teachers, the folks in the room, the well-intentioned folks who have a heart for education, which is why you're in this business in the first place. That is the main level of accountability that we have. Yes, we'll have to have some type of statewide level accountability. We can't be ridiculous about that. But for goodness sakes, we've got to reduce it, and we've got to bring accountability and control back home on the local level. Thank you.
Okay, our next question has to do with TRS insurance, the Texas Retirement System. Excuse me. During last year's legislative session, the Retiree Health Insurance Program, TRS Care, faced a budget shortfall of over $700 million. This is not the first time TRS Care has had significant funding problems. Funding for TRS Care is based on aggregate teacher payroll and does not match up with growing health care costs and trends. This funding mechanism is broken, but it has not received a permanent fix. If elected, what will you do to fix the funding mechanism for TRS Care? And we'll start with Mr. Lawson.
Insurance and healthcare costs are a crisis throughout the nation. It's across industries, and our public schools are obviously no exception to that. The insurance costs forced my family out of our preferred plan onto a high deductible plan last year. I'm not an insurance expert, but it isn't clear to me why TRS Care isn't more affordable. The number of teachers that are in that program, it should be providing a very large group reduction in the cheaper coverage. But the insurance that was provided to my wife as a teacher was never as good as the insurance that I received from my employer, even though my employer is participating in a much smaller group. So our legislature actually needs to try to understand that better. The legislature is looking at some different aspects of TRS Care between now and the next session, but the bottom line is that changes are needed in order to keep insurance volatility from ruining the retirement of our teachers. Inflation can't be allowed to continue to cut their pensions year after year. Reform to TRS and TRS Care has to be addressed. Those two things definitely have to be priorities in looking into those systems in the next legislature. Thank you.
Mr. Shaw.
Of the four questions, this is the one that I really didn't like, just to be honest. Because I'm a realist first, and it really hurts to see the shortfall. But then I look at my nation and I realize that we have $100 trillion in unfunded liability. Those of you who are on Medicare, those of you who get Social Security, which was misspent by the federal government, which was taken instead of properly put aside. We come back to the same problem, the same solution. It's going to be somebody's going to have to start doing something and start thinking, and saying, hey, we got a problem. How are we going to address it? We just can't keep kicking the can down the road, which is what politicians do. I can't offer you a solution today. I'm not about to even going to try to offer a solution here in 2 minutes. What I'm going to say is that we need to have people who are thinkers. We have to have either, forget, and no offense, intended. Forget the legal talk. We might need businessmen. We might need engineers to solve problems, because we have to start looking at things differently than what is business as usual in the legislature. Yes, we have a shortfall. There's not an easy fix. If you just saw the Herald Democrat Tuesday, the legislature's got 80 million extra as far as their funding. I don't know how it's only 80 million when we've got a robust economy going on in Texas, but I'm going to believe the comptroller for now. So it's a tough problem. It's not going to be an easy solution. I'm not about to even offer you an easy solution at this time. But it does take thinking that's a little bit different than what you've seen in the past in Austin.
Mr. Couch.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I think I may have said that I'm a job creator and I'm a businessman. I'm a fixer. I'm a revitalizer. I've been in that situation for the last 6 years with my business in Sherman, Texas. I bought it whenever it was making a downwardly spiral of 5-figure a year in gross, and now we're up to the higher end of the 6 figures in 5-6 years. That's what I do. I fix things. So my encouragement to everyone watching and listening tonight is stop electing politicians who give you rhetoric and who speak really well and who look really good in a red tie. Even though I know I'm wearing a red tie, I'm not saying I look at it. But stop electing the same type of person. I implore you to get outside your box, meet every one of us, and elect the one that you know you can talk to. My cell phone number is on my cards. I've walked 5,000 doors. Because I care. I'm not the resident expert on this issue. I don't honestly believe that anyone on this stage can give you a legitimate answer to this, because there's so many complexities on this issue, and a degree necessary to give you the specific reforms. But and I put myself at the top of that list. But I can't sit here and agree that the broken system needs to be fixed, and that obviously there's some issues of cost of living that has to be addressed, and I can go in that conversation with the best of them, right? And I absolutely agree that tying healthcare funding to an arbitrary factor such as the active salary pool doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And this is a really serious and complicated issue, because these are our veteran teachers. These are the ones who are before us and who have plowed the way for us to have an education, right? Because I don't have all the answers, I'm willing to say so that to you tonight. But what I will promise to you is exactly what I've done on my campaign. That's either come knock your door, go grab coffee, and sit and talk to you on the phone. Our elected officials need to do a better job of prioritizing the state's resources. As the next state representative from House District 62, I'm not going to be beholden to the political insiders or special interest groups, and I will fight to ensure that our teachers receive the care that they need.
Mr. Smith.
I did not wear the red tie. Thank goodness. I'm so glad that we have this as a part of our discussion, and it's really preaching to the choir here because of how important this is to y'all. But we have north of 260,000 Texans on this TRS Care program, and it's something we've got to address seriously. Years ago, there was essentially a bad deal that was struck with Texas teachers, trying to do something about the Social Security fund balance. And the deal was that teachers would essentially not receive Social Security. Well, now here we are in 2017, and we have the Affordable Care Act, or whatever you want to call it, that is causing problems with our insurance markets. And we're in a disaster situation. We're in a little bit of a crisis state. And now on top of that, they're wanting to take away your defined benefit plan. So let me just start by saying, we've got to keep our defined benefit plan, and then we've got to go from there. We've got to make sure that we do not balance the budget on the backs of our teachers. This is, again, this is more evidence of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it is all through our public education funding, and it is right here in your pocketbook tonight, and we've got to do something about that. We've got to prioritize. And we've got to stop spending money on standardized tests and all the other things that we spend money on in education. We've got to stop spending money on welfare state. And we've got to decide that public education is valuable to Texans. Public education does drive the 11th largest economy in the world. There is a partnership, whether you want to admit it or not, between this great standard of living we have and public education, and we've got to make sure that we take care of our retired teachers. Thank you.
Ms. Hefner?
So in the spirit of transparency, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know that until about 3 weeks ago, I didn't know anything about what was going on with our retired teachers' education. And I've been looking into that and reaching out to people to understand a little bit better what's going on. And from what I can tell, there's a mess. The last session, the Texas legislature, I did notice, tried to break its promise to retired teachers. They tried to quietly defund the health insurance for retired teachers while they had us all focused on the bathroom. In fact, there was more time wasted on discussing the bathroom than there was discussion of our retired teachers' health insurance. And that's true, because I watched the sessions. I researched, and from what I can see, retired teachers have not gotten a cost of living increase since 2013. If that's correct, that's terrible. And before that, it had been 12 years prior. That's bad enough, but then compound with it the cost of the health insurance quadrupling. How do we expect our retired teachers to survive? Our teachers work long, hard hours and receive poor pay, serving our children and preparing our children for the future in exchange for retirement security. So you can see why it comes as a surprise when the legislature broke its promise to retired teachers by raising premiums and the out-of-pocket expenses. They knew it would anger voters, so they delayed the price increase for the health insurance until later. And to me, that's not acceptable. I can't promise that I have all the answers to that question today, but I can promise you this. You send me to Austin, I'm not going to talk about a bathroom. I'm going to talk about your retirement.
Okay, that concludes our prepared moderator questions, and now we'll move into our audience questions. First, I want to say thank you for everybody showing up tonight. It's great to see so many people interested in public education and our students, so thank you very much for showing up. Thank you for the ones that filled out question cards. If you had a question, filled out a card. We've had 2 questions that were selected to ask the candidates. And we're going to see how well you think on your feet here. They have not seen these questions. They have no idea what I'm about to ask. So, good luck, gentlemen. So the first question from our audience is, will you support keeping our defined benefit retirement system as it is now and oppose the movement to change to defined contributions? We'll start with Mr. David Shaw.
I guess I would be a hypocrite if I said I would go against it because I have defined benefits as a military retiree. I have a defined benefit from my civilian employer. But I also know that in reality, what's happening in corporations everywhere is a move to the IRA 401k portion. This is a question that says, would I continue it or would I move to it? I'm not going to commit to either way because I'm a guy, I'm an engineer, I want to study all the issues first. I want to make certain I understand what it is that we're doing. We've seen problems in defined benefits. For example, in my defined benefit, it's frozen. You've heard of people who say they're retired, they're on a fixed income. That's my defined benefit. So with inflation, it just eats out of that pocket over here saying, this isn't going up anymore, so you're going to have to sit there. So that's one of the problems with a defined benefit. Whereas I also have an IRA, which, I can sit there and say, I put money aside during that time, and that kind of grows with the market. And if you have financial advisors, don't do it yourself unless you're an expert. I'm not an expert in finances. It's done well. I let my financial advisor take care of it. My goal is to pass it on to my children, but, I never know. I can't presume the future. So on answer to that, I would love to see you being able to keep your defined benefits. I can tell you from military retirement, defined benefits have changed over the years. At one time we were promised our medical cost is going to be zero. Not true. Not true. We still have an out-of-pocket coming even when you're retired military. So the government and politicians tend to change. I will look at the issue from both sides and look at it as an engineer.
Mr. Couch,
Randy, can you repeat the last part of the question?
let me repeat the entire question.
Thank you.
Will you support keeping our defined benefit retirement system as it is now and oppose the movement to change to defined contributions?
Yeah, the answer to the first part of the question, I would say, again, I think this is where you have to go with someone who is a business thinker, who has experience in that. So to answer your question, yes, I would keep your defined benefits intact, and I would oppose the other measures. And I do think that this is something that has to be looked at in the next session. I know I've been contacted actually a couple of days ago by a couple of people asking a similar question. And I'll tell you, it is a serious and complicated issue that I will definitely look into, but I will keep your defined benefits as stated. And like I said earlier in the TRS question, because I don't have all the answers and I'm willing to say so, I want to promise you that I will be an easily reachable representative. I have met with so many teachers and superintendents throughout the district and Grayson, Fannin, and Delta counties, and I've heard needs, and each school district has very different needs. I met with one superintendent who told me that he has a negative $415,000 deficit he's dealing with going into the next year. Those are serious issues that we have to look at on a very complex scale across the state of Texas, and I will commit to you to looking at those and listening to you. You guys are in the field, you're in the trenches, just like you probably can't tell me how to run an advertising agency or a marketing company or a design group. I probably can't tell you exactly everything about your organization and your industry, right? And so that's where the conversation has to happen, and that's where you have to rest assured whenever you lay your head to bed at night is, can I call this guy and will he fight for me? And there is a fight going on in Austin, people, and unless you elect someone who's not afraid to stand up to the establishment, you're going to get shortfalled again in the next session. So elect a guy who's an outsider in this race. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Again, this is about priorities. I said a moment ago that I want to be able to keep the defined benefit plan. That would be what I would fight for you. You as teachers, as principals, as staff, you guys are intelligent folks. When you were young, you had choices as to what you could do. You could have gone into business, you could have gone into law, God forbid. You could have been doctors, whatever you wanted to do, okay? Because you were intelligent, you could communicate, you could think. But you had a heart for education. And so we in the state of Texas said to you, if you will bring your talents and you will put them in the public education system, we'll be there for you in the end. And guess what? The state is not living up to its promise. Promises made need to be promises kept. I'm a conservative Republican, and I'm unashamed of it. I think we've got to keep our spending down. I think we've got to get our budgets down. I think we've got to get out of the way of the folks, and we've got to keep our property taxes down. But not at the expense of public education and not at the expense of our teachers. Thank you.
Ms. Hefner?
Okay, Okay, so when I started doing this research, the first thing that I did was I reached out to as many public educators that I knew to reach out to. And I asked them the question, what is the thing that you love about TRS, and what is it that you hate? And the first thing that everybody said was, I love that I have my benefits defined. That's simple. I can do that. I can go make sure your benefits stay defined. I'm not going to pretend like I have the answer to the second part of the question. But I will say that I believe in sticking up for people, doing what's right. And I know that our teachers are literally what molds our future. So if our teachers say they want their benefits defined, then we need to leave those benefits defined. Y'all have a good day.
Mr. Lawson.
This is obviously going to be a hot issue for the next legislative session. It's defined benefit plans are seeing stress in a lot of places in the country. And our retired teachers have not exactly been taken care of, so they're not really very comfortable with anybody talking about making changes to their plan. And they have reason to be afraid. When you don't get a cost of living increase for 15 years, it's hard to trust the people that are making those decisions for you. So there are a couple of things that are absolutely requirements for any discussions about benefits. One is that those who are retired or anywhere close to retired have absolutely got to be protected. That's complicated with a plan like this because it relies so much on the people who are paying into the current plan. So how any changes to that might affect people that are retired is complicated. But that has to be a minimum requirement to anything that happens to this plan. No changes for retiree benefits. They have to be protected. We have to make sure that they're getting cost of living increases. The other thing that we have to do is make sure that education is an attractive occupation for great people. You want to attract people into become teachers or administrators, they have to have good benefits. Our legislature has to make it a priority to make sure that education is an occupation that attracts excellence. That's important for education, it's important for Texas, it's important for our families. Everybody is counting on education being an attractive occupation for the best people.
Okay, we're running late on time, and we had hoped to get through this a lot faster. So the second question, I'm not going to ask it of you. I'm going to let you off the hook. The question had to do with school funding and property taxes, and I think you pretty much covered it anyway. So I'm going to let you off the hook on that. We did have some great questions, and appreciate everybody for submitting those. But due to time constraints, we're going to move on and get on to our closing remarks. So at this time, we'll have closing remarks by each candidate. We have 2 minutes, and we'll start with Mr. Couch.
Let us off the hook. Well, keep us on the hook, y'all. That's your jobs to us, is to keep us informed and keep us up to speed on what's happening. But you know, the reason that I decided to run for state representative, even though that I knew I'd probably be, the outsider or the underdog, so to speak, in the Republican race, is because I really do believe that people are hungry for someone who would actually sit down and listen to their concerns first and foremost. Listening is 90% of this job. And someone who would tell them the truth, and someone who would go down there and fight for what they believe in. So my goal tonight was to be honest, to actually answer the questions if I could, where I could, and if elected, that's a promise I'm going to make to you, is to always listen to the people who chose me to represent them. Because I knew from the start that I wouldn't have all the endorsements and all the political back-rubbing from others and political insiders. I knew I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have piles of cash from special interest groups. But those things don't matter to me either. Because I'll tell you what I do have. I have the support of this great community, the support of my family, the support of the business community here, other entrepreneurs and job creators like myself in Grayson County. I have strong support from our faith leaders and our churches. And those things are far more important to me than the opinions of lobbyists and lawyers down in Austin, Texas. They're far more important to me than one politician rubbing another politician's back. I really respect everyone up here tonight. I think everyone's great people and they have the best interests of the district at heart, but here are the facts. I'm the only candidate in this race who has both a proven track record of conservative reform and bona fide credentials as a job creator and political outsider. I'm running for the seat to go down to Austin, and I'm going to slap term limits on all the bums who've been there for 20 plus years. There's no reason for them to be there. Get in, do the job, get it done, and get out of there. This is a citizen legislature. I'm running to tell the political elite and the lobbyists that they will find no shelter for their divisive tactics in Grayson, Fannin, or Delta counties in regards to education. If that sounds like the type of candidate who you want representing and fighting for you, because trust me people, it's going to be a fight when we get down there in January 2019. It's going to be a real dogfight. And if I'm the kind of candidate you want to see in our state government, I ask for you to come out and vote for me on March 6th in the Republican primary. And I would love to speak to you tonight. I have a table outside. I'd love to give you a business card with my cell phone number on it. Thank you.
Reggie Smith.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you to everyone who took part in organizing this. It's been a real pleasure. I've been looking forward to this discussion tonight for some time, and it's not disappointing me. Let me just speak to you a little bit personally. I love this area. I grew up here, as you heard me say. I'm raising my family here. I've dedicated my professional life to this area. I will tell you that I am getting a very good response in this campaign, and I'm humbled by it. And I think there's a couple of reasons why that is. I think, one, people like what I have to say. I'm conservative. I'm a Republican. I think we need to do those things that you can imagine a conservative Republican would want to do. I think the other thing is that they believe me when I say what I say because they know me, because I grew up here, because I've been in the church, or I've been in the community organization, or I've been in the schoolroom with them, or I've been out at the courthouse with them, or I've served at the Republican Club with them, and they know me, and so they can believe me. And I think that's why I'm getting such a good response. Believe me when I tell you that $18.6 billion being shifted to the property owners of the state of Texas cannot keep going. We have folks who have decided that they do not want to own a home. The next generation has decided, in large part in Texas, that many of them can't afford to own a home, and that's ridiculous. Some of them are moving to Oklahoma, for goodness sake, because they don't want to pay property taxes, and that's ridiculous. So we've got to do something about that, and it goes back to what I said earlier. It's about not robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's about priorities. We must prioritize public education in the state of Texas. And we've got to do so at the expense of some other program, but not public education. So ladies and gentlemen, if you want someone who's going to go down and fight for the interest of public education, I'm the man. Thank you.
Valerie Hefner.
So in closing, I would like to say a special thank you to all of the superintendents and teachers that contacted me back and were allowing me to pick their brain, ask questions, and get their information. I know you guys are incredibly busy, and I appreciate the time that you gave me. Going into a profession like teaching or public education already speaks volumes to your heart, your character, and your dedication to our future and to the community. And because you have a servant's heart, I believe that you get overlooked. And I believe you get taken advantage of. And I will ask you to please vote for me and allow me to be your strong voice in Austin, because I will not abandon the promise of public education. I will not forget, but will fight for our current and our retired teachers. And I'm going to rein in that beast that they force you to administer in the name of accountability. Because now is the time for us to hold them accountable in Austin. Thanks again for having me out tonight and having me here. My name is Valerie Hefner. Have a good night.
Britt Lawson.
As a representative, I'll have a responsibility to represent everybody in the education chain. Responsibility to make sure that our administrators aren't trying to work with their hands tied. Responsibility to make sure that our teachers have what they need in order to prepare the next generation of Texans to lead the world. And a responsibility to address the education concerns of Texas families. As an engineer, I know that good information is a requirement for solving problems. The top two education priorities for Texas in the next legislature are to fix the funding mechanism for public education and to honor our commitments for retired teachers. There are other areas where I am going to need educators to educate me so that we can address those needs for public education. I'm looking forward to hearing from you and working with you. I'm Britt Lawson. I would appreciate your vote, and thank you very much for your service to Texas.
David Shaw.
Opening and closing, that's unusual. Actually, none of us are really wearing power ties. I noticed that's a red, but not a red power tie. Green is for Go Mean Green, North Texas, and Army. So just to let you know, I appreciate being here. I appreciate all of you. Teachers, you are the best people to be accountable to those individual students. Not Austin. No offense to my good friend Randy. Sorry, local school boards. Teachers, you have that job. If the one thing I said about choice is there's nothing to fear about choice. If you are a good school, guess what? Your school is going to be chosen. So don't fear choice just because you hear, we're going to lose money, we're going to do that. No. I'm going to borrow from the Army. There was an old slogan, be the best that you can be. That's what I expect out of teachers. That's what I expect out of administrators. That's what I expect out of elected officials, to be the best that they can be. We've had some, excuse me if you hear this and you take offense, sorry, we've had some dunderheads in politics. They don't know what they're doing. I was happy to hear that I have another fellow engineer up here. Engineers are problem solvers. We like to fix things. If it's not broken, we might find a way to break it so we can fix it, but that's an old joke. So we like to go out and fix things. We are not stuck in a status quo. I think you heard from all of these candidates, and I bet you every one of them could have taken those questions that were asked tonight and spent 15 to 30 minutes on each question alone. We don't have that much time. We don't have the luxury. Each of us will probably be out and about. My campaign doesn't start until pretty close to the election. I'm going to be on the ballot in November. 3 guys, they don't know yet. Come out and speak to us. We're ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I pitch it back to Tim to close this out, I want to say a couple of things. I want to applaud you for coming tonight and speaking to us. We went over the ground rules and we said no debating, no arguing, and thank you for abiding by that. But I am a little disappointed that you didn't fight a little bit, because when you get to Austin, whichever one of you gets elected, I hope when you get to Austin you're going to be fighting for us, fighting for the people, the taxpayers, the voters in District 62. So good luck. And I want to say to whichever one of you gets elected, I hope that you will do the right thing and fight for our students every day that you're in Austin. Do the right thing, because our students matter, and we expect no less. So please keep that in mind. This time I want to throw it back to Tim to close us out.
Let's give another round of applause for the candidates. Moderator, who had the wisdom to cancel the second question, so we're on schedule. Good job, Randy. Good job. We would just want you to have a few pieces of information. Voter registration is still open. There's cards out in the lobby. You can go online if you're not registered to vote. The final day is Monday, February 5th. Early voting begins February 20th. The last day to apply for ballot by mail is February 23rd. Early voting ends March 2nd, and then you'll see other dates. But there's some windows here in the next week or two that are right in front of us that we put in front of you and encourage you to engage in. Outside, when you leave, the candidates have material. I believe all of them have committed to be out there as well if you wish to follow up with them and speak to them. We're glad they're here talking about public education. Randy's going to tell us, but we, the small planning group, are looking at having another education forum with other candidates. We just thought tonight we would keep it to this group. So please keep eyes and ears open for another possible gathering around public education. And I agree with Randy. He's implored whoever goes to Austin to do the right thing. I would implore all of you, you're here to support public education. You all have friends. You all have friends you've talked to about the things you like and dislike about public education. Please, please, please go home, go to work tomorrow. Tell them the only way to take control of these issues is to engage them and support public education. Again, thank you for being here, and we'll see you again at the next forum. Thank you very much.